An acropolis that has kept its secrets for thousands of years is being investigated by archaeologists in what was once the Greek colony of Cumae in Italy. The elite of the region are typically buried in long, sealed tombs here, according to these specialists. However, inside one of these vaults, the group finds a complex mural that brings to light a long-forgotten past. The hidden history of an ancient Italian city has been revealed by the mesmerizing 2,000-year-old mural. Ever since the Phoenicians first arrived on the shores of what is now Italy in the 10th century BC, this Mediterranean country has been a melting pot of different cultures. But even though the Romans arguably take up most of the pages in school history books today, the truth is that many different civilizations have left their marks on this part of the world. Back in the 8th century BC, for example, the homeland of the ancient Greeks was under threat. So spurred on by crises such as climate change and famine, the Greeks spread out to colonize and trade with other lands, and soon enough, Greek settlements had sprung up in Sicily and on the Italian peninsula. Eventually, though, the growing power of Rome would overwhelm Italy's Greek colonies, absorbing them into their seemingly unstoppable empire. But for many centuries, Grecian culture flourished in Italy, and even today, Greek ruins can be spotted among the temples and amphitheaters of ancient Rome. Back in the early days of Greek colonization, then settlers from the island of Euboea have arrived on the coast of what is now Campania. This is some 15 miles from the modern-day city of Naples. At that time, then, colonists had already prospered on the nearby island of Proteciosi, and those in charge were seemingly keen to push on to the mainland. So in Campania, the Greek colonists were drawn to a patch of fertile ground flanked by the ocean on one side, and there the populace founded the colony of Cuny in around 750 BC. Interestingly, though, these settlers were not the first people to find the spot. In fact, experts believe that both Bronze Age and Iron Age dwellings once existed on the side too. In any case, with the founding of Cumae, the Greeks established their first settlement on Italy's mainland, and even as the Grecian people continued to explore and trade by sea, they evidently adapted well to colonial life too. As the economic and political power of this city grew, for instance, its people expanded their reach into neighboring territories. Soon then, Cumae was thriving, and according to the Greek geographer Pausanias, the city sent bands of settlers to found new colonies in Sicily and at Chiu in Greece. As a result, over time, the colonists' influence spread all the way to Punta Campanella, which is on the opposite side of the Bay of Naples, along the Campania coast. As a result, Greek culture naturally spread to parts of the Italian mainland. For instance, the system of letters that would eventually become the Latin alphabet, which is still in use today, is the Euboean alphabet. Additionally, according to the Greek historian Dionysius of Halicarnassus, hue signifies that wealth and power were highly prized at the time. However, not everyone admired the colony, including my successor and enemies. The Etruscans, who lived in what is now Tuscany, were the most prominent of these. During the late 6th and early 5th centuries, the two civilizations frequently engaged in conflict, but the Cumaeans ultimately prevailed. However, Greek Cumae's glory days did not last past 421 BCE. In fact, the city was conquered by the Oscan people of Campania, who overthrew many aspects of the Greek culture of the colonies. In the end, the language was also changed. However, some aspects of the region's history have remained unchanged. After that, BCQV changed hands once more in 338. The colony became a quiet backwater on the outskirts of the empire under Roman rule. However, the city began to regain its prosperity in the 1st century BC. You have to understand that wealthy Romans, looking for a place to relax on the coast, had made the area a popular destination by this time. Therefore, the colony inevitably grew to almost double the size of its unfortunate neighbor Pompeii. Over the years, the many different occupants who had lived there had left their marks on the city. So eventually, the region boasted a collection of fine temples, a stadium baths, and an aqueduct for the next 450 years to the citizens of Cuomi lived in relative peace, that is, until the onset of the Gothic Wars in 535 brought fresh conflict to the region. Then in 1205, some 7 centuries later, Cuomi was destroyed. But unlike many other fallen cities, Cuomi was never quite forgotten. And over the years, everyone from artists to archaeologists have visited the ruins of what was once one of Greece's most ambitious colonies. It didn't even take too long before people moved back to the land surrounding Cuny, and excavations into these ancient areas began as early as the 17th century. In fact, remarkable treasures started to surface from the region. This included a large statue that was recovered in 1606. Then in 1738, construction workers made a remarkable discovery that changed the face of Italian archaeology for good. That year, you see, building works were being carried out in the region on a palace for Charles of Bourbon, the King of Naples. But while workers were laying the foundations, the team seemingly stumbled across the ruins of Herculaneum, a town that had been destroyed in the Vesuvius eruption. This led 10 years later to a Spanish engineer uncovering the remains of Pompeii. Many people then flocked to excavate these fascinating sites, and Cuomi itself was once again abandoned. This unfortunately made the ancient city a prime target for looters, who are thought to have stolen countless artifacts from the unprotected site. In 1852, an official excavation finally got underway. Numerous excavations were actually carried out in and around Cuomi in the years that followed. The Misteria del Gigante amphitheater and the necropoles beneath the city were the focus of these excavations, which continued into the 19th and 20th centuries despite publicity and an increase in looters visiting the ruins. During this time, archaeologists also found a lot of interesting places, like the Temple of Apollo, the Temple of Jupiter in the Crypto Romana, an old military tunnel under the city, and the Cave of the Sibyl, a rock-cut cave. It is believed that this is where a well-known oracle or sibyl once gave her predictions. Additionally, the Cuman Sibyl is believed to have been one of the most well-known oracles, despite the fact that oracles were fairly common in ancient times. Clearly, the prophet had kept in touch with her predictions on leaves and left them at the entry of her cavern. She also thought she was connected to the underworld and might have even created the river Styx in nearby tunnels. The College de France's Jean-Pierre Brown and Priscilla Monzi from the French National Center for Scientific Research then arrived in Quebec at the beginning of the 21st century and began excavating the site of one of the city's ancient necropoles. Apparently, this necropolis had once been part of a relatively built-up area where roads and the Greek sanctuary had stood. In addition, the archaeologists began to uncover artifacts from the region's fascinating past shortly thereafter. Particularly, the group discovered hundreds of rock-cut tombs beneath the city. Archaeologists also found vaulted spaces that had been used as burial chambers before. Among these tombs, the area is made of a local type of volcanic rock called tuff, and each chamber is made up of a series of 3 tombs in one room. Interestingly, a single large rock had been used to seal the door, making it easy to enter the interior. Sadly though, it appeared that these tombs had been looted in the same way that Cuny had been looted in the 19th century. However, the archaeologists were still able to locate human remains and funerary items. The team was able to prove with these that the chambers had been used sometime in the 2nd century BCE. Case of something so elaborate, a tomb excavated a few years ago had the funeral boxes painted in imitation marble, Monsi told the Israeli newspaper Haaretz in September 2018. Only the tomb excavated in June was painted with figurative scenes. The mural, which covers the sides and entrance wall of the tomb, depicts a naked servant holding a jug and a vase forged from silver on the other side of the door. Meanwhile, a type of vessel known as a spatula, along with an amphora-type jar, and a table can be seen elsewhere. A kind of vase called a crater complete with stand is painted. These elements were all together enough to tell archaeologists that the scene shown is one of a banquet. In fact, the experts believe that figures of guests had initially been painted along the tomb's side walls. But now these are missing, and only traces of landscapes remain. Apparently, though, just the fact that this tomb contained a mural of all is evidence that its occupants had been members of Cumi's elite, and the high quality of the piece, as well as the vibrancy of the colors, adds even more weight to this idea. In fact, according to McKinsey, there might have been as many as 3 high society Romans buried here. Yet, even though the tomb appears to have 3 separate beds, the team will need to do further research before they can confirm how many people had actually been buried there. Meanwhile, much of the press coverage of the find has focused on the content of the mural itself and the rather risk nature of its subject matter. But was it really scandalous to depict a naked servant during Roman times? After all, experts believe that nudity was much more accepted back then. Additionally, it is said that the most affluent members of society accumulated works of art that would today be considered lewd. For instance, when archaeologists discovered the ruins of Herculaneum and Pompeii, they found cultures frozen in time. However, in addition to the horrifying reminders of the people's grisly fate, they also discovered numerous examples of art preserved in the same way as everything else, and it is said that many of the pieces contain sexual content. In point of fact, one particular piece of art that was found in Herculaneum was so shocking that the king allegedly ordered that it be locked away, and the monarch even temporarily halted the excavations out of fear of a scandal. However, that very same piece would eventually be included in an exhibit at a British museum in 2013 along with a caution for parents. Strangely enough, the CUNY mural may still have been viewed as an example of bad taste despite not having a naked subject. Instead, it's thought that the painting might just have been out of style for showing off a style that was popular 2 centuries ago. Munsey explained that the banquet is a common theme in the oldest tombs, but this is Campania's first tomb from the 2nd century BC that documents it. So, were the people living in the necropolis really that far behind the times? Or did the designer of the tomb just have a soft spot for food and wine? Munsey said that the mural had been added to the tomb early on, not later. To put it another way, before the artist started working, at least one burial had already taken place. The expert explained that the paintings are a single constructive intervention in the tomb's constructive phase. You see, Munsey believes that the burial ground had been in use as late as the early medieval period, around the time that the Gothic Wars had begun. So the necropolis was not just a feature of Cube's ancient period. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.